Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
I believe a wise decision is the best decision, but there's something I love more than making the right decision just one time. It's a leader who hungers for wisdom. They're always looking to get wiser, to grow, to learn, to be a person who is really trying to get better every day. Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. I'm Randy Gravitt.
And I'm Mark Miller.
And I'm so excited to talk about this fifth fundamental from Mark's new book coming out next week, Uncommon Greatness. We're getting close. I'm fired up about that. But this idea of embodying a leader's heart. And we said yesterday that there are 5 what we're calling heart habits. We've been teaching it for years to people. And the first one of these habits is really an important one. It's to hunger for wisdom, to be a wise leader, a leader who's growing. Now, that sounds great, but how do you do that? How do you do that? And I think it's rooted in a development plan. Let's start there.
Yeah, just start with the actual tactic. Leaders are learners, period. Hard stop, end of sentence. Now, they may do it in different ways. I've heard it said that leaders are readers. I can half-heartedly embrace that because I know some really great leaders that aren't readers, but they're learners. So there is a hierarchy. Yes, you may choose to read, but leaders are learners. And I think a development plan provides strategy, direction, purpose, and intentionality. I mean, because you can be a learner and be totally scattered. And I think you can get to the end of a season, whether it's a quarter, a year, or 5 years, and you've learned this much about 1,000 things. I'm just not sure that's the way you maximize your influence. I'm not sure that's how you grow in wisdom, as opposed to saying, I'm going to intentionally and strategically pursue this topic or that topic or that topic to close a critical gap or to leverage a strength. I just think a development plan is an ideal mechanism or tool to help leaders get better.
Yeah, and it gives us a level of, if we have the right kind of development plan, a level of focus like you're describing there, just to narrow the target of that critical gap or what it is we're trying to learn. I'll say something too here. I think you said this, I've heard you talk about this before, and I'll do it in the spirit of, we were talking about valuing results in relationship, and we're compensating for bias over there and all that. If you missed any of those episodes, go back and check those out. But one of the things, I think it's applicable here too, because some people are natural learners, some people aren't, and that doesn't get us off the hook if we're not. You've talked about that in your own life before. Will you share a little bit about this, being an intentional, making a choice to learn?
Sure. So the backstory on that is somebody asked me several years ago, they said, can you explain how you started as a failed front counter employee? Failed meaning I quit because I didn't want to be fired.
I was awful. Fired, yeah.
I was awful in the restaurant. You then moved to the warehouse and the mailroom, and 40 years later, you're leading leadership development. Like, how is that even possible? and I actually had never thought about it like that. And I went back to a conversation that I had about 40 years ago with my supervisor. And he said, hey, if you want more influence, if you want more impact, and you want more opportunity, he said, there's only one path. And I was a kid. I was 19 years old. And I said, really? Because I would like more influence and more impact and more opportunity. He said, one path. I said, well, what is it? And he said, lifelong learning. I said, really? He said, yeah, that's how the world works. I said, really? He said, yeah, more influence, more impact, and more opportunity. That's the only path. And I have since reflected on that conversation, and I've said it like this. What he convinced me of in that conversation is that your capacity to grow determines your capacity to lead. And so I'm kind of sharing this with this group of people that had asked the question, and somebody said, well, that's probably easy for you. And I said, well, which part of that would be easy for me? They said, well, the learner part. I said, well, why do you say that? And they said, well, I bet that's one of your top strengths. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with Strength Finders, an assessment that Gallup published a decade ago, it tells people what they're good at, and who doesn't love to know what they're good at? Yeah. And one of their 34 strengths is learner. And they said, yeah, I bet you're a learner. I said, well, that's interesting. They said, why do you say that? I said, well, learner's not in my top 5. I don't think it's in my top 10. It may not be in my top 25.
Or 30.
And they said, really? And I said, yeah. They said, well, you act like a learner. I said, well, thanks. I made a choice over 40 years ago because I wanted more influence. I wanted more impact. I wanted more opportunity. And if the path is lifelong learning,
sign me up.
Sign me up. And so I'm still on that journey.
That's so great. So if you're listening here today and you're thinking like, oh, I'm kind of in Mark's boat, I'm not a learner. Like, how would I do that? The company is lead every day, but right here for a second, I'd like to talk about learn every day. I think that's the commitment. It's just like, let's make a decision that we're going to every day try to get a little bit better. We're going to try to talk to somebody, read
You learn from conversations, you learn from experience, you learn from resources, you learn from relationships, you learn from successes, you learn from failures, but you kind of put on this lens. And I would argue that, I'm assuming this would be true for others, that you can move from a choice to a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And you just then see the world as a learner. And again, I think that's the path for more influence, more impact, and more opportunity.
Yeah, that's good. I want to give you a little warning here. It's been a long time since I've been in a fist fight. I don't know that I've been in one in like decades, but I was in a couple as a kid. And it's like when you're in a fist fight, it's not fun. I mean, nobody signs up like, let me get in a fist fight here, but you are in a fist fight when it comes to your own personal growth. Every day, I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but I talk about the noise that shows up on your schedule. It is there all the time. Your social media feeds going all the time. Your media feeds going all the time. Your own head noise is going all the time. Your boss is making noise. There's email noise and detail. There's noise. I mean, noise is in the system. Some of it's good. If your boss is making noise, that's good noise. But there's some of the noise that just becomes clutter if we're not careful, and you're going to have to really work hard to separate that noise and put quiet in your schedule if you're going to spend some time learning every day. I want to encourage you to protect your schedule, protect your calendar. I think it's a vital part of that. We talked about a couple episodes ago that love goes slow when we're talking about not hurrying. I think learning, sometimes we need to create space to go slow enough to learn, because if we're not careful, that quicksand that you talk about all the time, it's very real, and it'll just suck us in.
I don't want to totally challenge that, because I think the spirit of it is correct, but you may be in a season or a circumstance where that's really hard.
That's right.
But you can reclaim minutes.
That's exactly right. And sometimes the technology can actually
that's what I was going to say, like audiobooks. It's 10 minutes from here to the Starbucks. So I can listen to 10 minutes of an audiobook in that 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And as much as I go to Starbucks,
that's right.
I can cover some audiobooks.
That's a couple hours a week.
Just back and forth to Starbucks. Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's don't go that far.
But
I'm just saying, yes, it's great to block out time, but redeem the time.
Yeah.
Look for those minutes and those moments that you might have spent listening to the radio or on social media, and say, hey, maybe I can do something else. Yeah. Maybe there's a higher and better use for this time.
Yeah, that's good.
So I think it's both and.
That's great. So we would encourage you to learn every day. And then the other thing I would just say before we go today is as you begin to learn, I would encourage you, and I think this helps your learning, but to pay it forward. This idea of making sure that you share what you're learning with others, it can be really catalytic to helping you remember but it can also add value to somebody else.
If you'll make a commitment to share what you're learning, you'll be a better learner. I think the greatest season of learning in my entire life was probably about 15 years ago, when I committed to writing 3 blog posts a week. Now, that may not sound like a lot. I know you've blogged more than that in your life. And that's when blogs were a thing. Some of you young people need to
know what a blog is.
You'll need to Google that to know what it is. But these were, in my case, 500 to 800 word articles or essays on a leadership topic. And I committed to do 3 a week, and I did that for almost 4 years, about 650 blog posts. I have never learned more, including my days in college. Well, I learned a lot more blogging than I did in my days in college, but that's on me, not the institution.
Your parents wish you would have started blogging a lot earlier.
I know. But it was that commitment to share what I'm learning put a good, healthy pressure on me to keep learning.
Yeah.
And so there are lots of forms. You don't have to start blogging. That's not what I'm saying. But are you going to share what you're learning with your team? Are you going to share what you're learning with your best friend? Are you going to share it with your kids? Or are you going to share it on social media?
Yeah.
if you'll commit to share what you're learning, you'll be a better learner.
It could be a podcast you're learning from. You pay that forward. It can be a quote you hear. I mean, it can be really
Anything.
simple. But yeah, this idea of paying
You'll be a better
forward
learner.
is huge. So all right, so we wrap up today. Hunger for wisdom. It is heart habit number 1 when it comes to embodying a leader's heart. Wise leaders really are the most fun leaders to follow. If you ask me, I never want to follow a leader. I'm like, they're not very wise. You want to be a wise leader. It's what makes you a leader that others want to follow. It's one of the things. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about heart habit number 2. I hope you'll come back and join us for that. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.